What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that has been wearing on me a little bit with Black Ops 6, and this is the apparent lack of identity or cohesive theme or general art direction with the game. This is something that has been wearing on me over time, and I know I'm not alone on this. I've seen plenty of comments reflecting a lot of the things I've been feeling about this. So I did want to make a dedicated video talking about it. Now, just to be clear on a few things before I get into this, first off, I know Call of Duty isn't and never has been a milsim game. I'm not saying that Call of Duty should be a milsim. However, I personally prefer when COD used to have a general military theme and art style layered on top of its arcadey gameplay. I also know that we have had crazy, silly skins for a long time in COD now, and I'm not saying I just woke up one day and I'm suddenly surprised that we're seeing these things in the game. And I don't expect Call of Duty to be 100% fully realistic and immersive with its presentation. In fact, over the years, I've generally been quite forgiving with the little bits of wacky stuff mixed in here or there. However, it's gotten to the point where there's a complete lack of any cohesive art style or visual identity, and the fact that it just keeps getting worse and worse is really starting to get to me with this Call of Duty much more than any COD in the past. Also, another thing I want to be really clear about here is this is absolutely not my biggest issue with Black Ops 6 or the franchise in general. So just because I'm honing in on this one area with this particular video doesn't mean this is the only thing that I'm not happy with the game or the franchise, but it is something that does harm my overall perception of the game. And while of course, gameplay is what I care about the most, and that's what's actually keeping me around with Black Ops 6, I still genuinely enjoy the gameplay quite a bit. Despite the gameplay related issues that I do have, I'm still having a good time with it. And that's why I'm still streaming it and making content on it on a regular basis. However, it is getting harder and harder to look past the sheer quantity and diversity of wacky elements that are so far detached from the base theme of the game. We're still just in Season 2 of Black Ops 6, and we already have actual Ninja Turtles in the game. We've got a half-shark, half-human hybrid guy. We've got a stoner lizard. We have demons with flames coming off of them. Some kind of angel with big wings. A literal Terminator that has gameplay-related advantages because they're really hard to see and track and shoot many times, even though, yes, they do have the same hitbox as the other character models. Just like with that Gaia or Groot skin from the past, it's the same sort of story here. They're really hard to pick out. That's more a topic for a different video. And then on top of that, we've got like zombie skins in multiplayer. And that's just a handful of the crazy things I could think of off the top of my head. I guess there's also like gremlins in there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. And they just sort of mashed all of that together, and it just doesn't fit well together in my opinion. And it really destroys any sense of identity that this game had. I mean, even in the beta, we had a zombie and a robot in multiplayer, and I wasn't a big fan of that either. So I think we actually started with this issue with Black Ops 6, whereas most Call of Duty games, they at least start off with a very cohesive theme that's very comparable to the theme of the campaign. And then from there, they slowly start adding some wacky stuff over time. But with Black Ops 6, it was from right at the beginning of the game. And it's crazy because I look back, and while I may not have liked the 6v6 respawn gameplay of Modern Warfare 2019, one thing I absolutely loved about that game, and I will always give it credit for this, it maintained a very grounded, cohesive military theme throughout its entire life cycle, with maybe only like a few minor exceptions mixed in there, and even those exceptions, they managed to make them fit well enough that it wasn't insanely jarring or immersion breaking to run into those things. Like thinking back to the primary life cycle of that game within its first year, some of the craziest things I remember were like a guy in a cowboy hat, but he was still wearing like a bulletproof vest and looked like he was still ready for combat. Or a guy with no shirt on, but again, still looks like he's somewhat ready for combat. Like these are the most crazy skins we saw throughout the life cycle of that game until the Halloween event, which came almost an entire year after launch, like right around the end of its realistic life cycle. And this is where we got like the Jigsaw skin. And that was the one that I think really stood out as the first real immersion breaker in my eyes at least. But by then, the game had already run its course, and I'm always fine with them adding crazy things toward the end of the game's life cycle. And even that quote-unquote crazy skin doesn't hold a candle to the crazy skins that we've been seeing in Black Ops 6, and again, we're only in Season 2 of this game. So again, even though I personally didn't like the gameplay of Modern Warfare 2019, it was an extremely successful title for a variety of reasons, and I honestly think at least one of those reasons, one of the big ones, was the fact that it did have a clear identity to it, and it stuck to that identity very well. And it's worth mentioning that identity was also a very grown-up military-themed identity and not something that looks like it was targeted toward like 10-year-olds. So if that was so successful, why are we seeing all of these wacky skins come to the game, especially so early on in the game at the cost of the identity of that game? Well, I'm sure most of you guys know the answer to this immediately. They quite simply sell very well. There's a reason you run into these crazy skins so often. People are buying them. So I would be delusional to expect them to just stop bringing these style of skins. They've already got a taste for how much money they can bring in, and I don't see them backtracking on that now. And that does really suck. I find that to be frustrating on a personal level. And it's actually one of the big reasons that I'm actively keeping an eye out for another game or franchise to jump to. But unfortunately, gameplay-wise, that's the tough part. There's really nothing else that scratches that itch for me and acts as a proper replacement for Call of Duty for me. I feel like I'm largely just hanging on by a thread simply due to a lack of solid alternatives. And I feel there are many Call of Duty players that are currently in the same boat as me as well. So I think right now there's actually a massive opportunity for a competitor to come in and sweep up a big portion of the Call of Duty player base if they just come in, have arcadey gameplay style with a grown-up military theme attached to it. There's a big opportunity there, but it's also a big risk as well. It's hard to compete directly against COD, I get it. But it's frustrating to feel like we don't have that really solid alternative at our fingertips. Now, who knows, maybe the next Battlefield game will provide that alternative, although I know it's not a direct replacement gameplay-wise for Call of Duty, and I don't want it to be. I do want Battlefield to be Battlefield. But after seeing the recent leaks for Battlefield, I'm genuinely starting to look at that as something I may want to get into and finally jump in with 2 feet and really take the time to learn all the ins and outs and master the mechanics of it and make content on it as well. Of course, time will tell. We did get burned with the last Battlefield game, so I'm trying not to overhype it or anything for myself, but I just want to illustrate the fact that I'm really actively looking for alternatives right now. Now, when it comes to a solution to this problem for Call of Duty, I think there is a potential solution that other games have done in the past, and this is something I have mentioned before, but I'm going to bring it up here and maybe talk about it with a bit more detail. This would be a new option for an immersion filter. So this is a setting that would be off by default for everyone, so you'd have to actively go and turn it on, and if you do turn it on, from your perspective, it would turn any of the wacky skins that other people are using into a different skin that actually fits with the general theme of the game. So if somebody's using a Ninja Turtle skin, for instance, from their perspective, and from the perspective of everyone that has this option off, they will still see that Ninja Turtle skin, but for those players that have this immersion filter on, that skin will be converted into a different skin for them. Now, my understanding of this is on a technical level, this wouldn't actually be all that difficult to accomplish. It's very doable, and I don't think that's holding this back at all. I think the real problem here is it would prevent players with this setting turned on from being exposed to all of the crazy skins that they could be buying in the store. So it essentially eliminates a form of Call of Duty advertising the in-store items to any of the players that decide to turn this on. And this is almost definitely why we haven't seen them entertain a setting like this at this point. However, in saying this, I know there's a bunch of players that have left the game entirely, and they've cited this as one of the big reasons they left. It just felt like a kid game. It didn't really feel like a military-themed game, which is what they wanted out of Call of Duty. And so in my mind, at least, wouldn't it be better to retain those players by giving them an option that makes them happy and perhaps keeps them around for longer? I know it's hard to say without data. Perhaps it's just a really insignificant number of players that have been pushed away because of this, and they're just very vocal players. But I know it's something that's really been eating at me, and I've been a diehard Call of Duty fan for nearly 20 years at this point. And yet this is an area that's contributing to pushing me away from the franchise. Now, either way, one option that could help alleviate this loss of in-game advertising to players is perhaps make it so if you enable this setting, instead of turning those wacky skins into just a default free skin that you get in the game, make it so it always turns them into a theme-appropriate skin that's available in the shop. So you're still advertising to those players, and in fact, you would actually see more targeted advertising because the types of players that would be turning this setting on are not likely the types of players that would want to buy any of those wacky skins anyway. So that advertising to them doesn't really work. And if anything, like I said, it's just pushing them away. Whereas if you're specifically turning those characters into the milsim style characters that can be bought in the shop, or honestly even just like tactical skins that are maybe stretching it a little bit, but at least they're human and look like they're geared up for combat and not dressed up for Halloween or anything, those are the types of skins that would appeal to the players that have this setting turned on. And therefore, I think there's actually a bigger chance of converting that into sales in the store for you. And perhaps I'm being naive here, but I think it would be a win-win scenario if they did that. I'd be totally fine if every single skin that's being converted was a skin that had to be purchased in the store, and I were being constantly exposed to that if that skin fit with the theme of the game. Now, I know this is probably wishful thinking, it's probably not going to happen, but it's something I did want to share my thoughts on and really get off my chest because it's genuinely starting to become more of an issue for me, whereas in previous years, it was a very minor annoyance at best. But that's not the case anymore. It's actually starting to seriously affect my perception of the game and my general enjoyment with the game as well. Now, one last thing I'll say here is I know when this topic comes up, a lot of people say, why do you care what skins other people are using in the game? And I would just push back with that and say, why do you care what I see in my version of the game? If I want to turn this filter on and I would like to see a cohesive theme, how does that affect you negatively in any way? It would have the potential to noticeably improve my enjoyment and perception of the game, and nobody else in the game would know any different anyway, because it's only changing what I see on my end. So there we go. Those are all just my opinions on this, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the fact that Black Ops 6 especially has really gone all out with the wacky, crazy skins basically right from the beginning of this game, rather than starting off with a very clear identity and theme, and then maybe slowly over time, especially toward the end of the life cycle, they start bringing in the more wacky, crazy skins? Also, how would you feel about them adding an immersion filter to the game? Is this something you'd be on board with? Is it something you'd turn on for yourself, or would you leave it off? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.